Chapter 35-34. When Bailey Hongzhuang rejected Li Shengkai, Di Beichen's words also made Cheng Juna's expression turn extremely ugly. I don't have any requests for you. Di Beichen glanced at Cheng Junha. I just want you to leave your life here. Di Beichen's tone was somewhat cold and mocking, making Cheng Junha look even more like a fool. If you don't remove the roots when you cut the weeds, they will grow again when the spring breeze blows. For a cultivator like Cheng Junha, who had no bottom line, letting him live was tantamount to inviting endless trouble. Di Beichen had never been a person who liked trouble. He preferred to settle things neatly to avoid future troubles. Are you trying to force me into a dead end? Cheng Junha's expression was gloomy. He gritted his teeth and looked at Di Beichen, a trace of disbelief faintly flashing in his eyes. He had completely underestimated the determination of Di Beichen and the others, and Di Beichen's strength made him feel that he could not escape. Thinking that he might really die here, he could not help but panic. Di Beichen's sword-like eyebrows raised slightly, and the corners of his lips curved into a devilish smile. He said, I'm trying to force you into a dead end, so what? A life-and-death struggle won't do either of us any good, Cheng Junha emphasized. Hearing this, Di Beichen chuckled. You're thinking too much. It's not a life-and-death struggle between us at all, because only you can die, and nothing will happen to me. As Di Beichen's voice fell, Cheng Junha only felt a mouthful of blood in his heart. Although he knew that Di Beichen was telling the truth, it was enough to make him angry half to death. If his cultivation had not inexplicably decreased so much, he would not have fallen into such a situation. Aren't you afraid of Master Long's punishment? Cheng Junha did not give up. Di Beichen stabbed his sword towards Cheng Junha, his voice cold and resolute. You don't have to worry about that. Among Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, Shangguan Yingying was the most ruthless. She had been holding this grudge in her heart for a very long time. Ever since they had gone to the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples, she had always kept this matter in her heart. After experiencing the Skeleton Army incident, her resentment had become even stronger, and she had been holding it in without a place to vent. As time passed, her resentment naturally deepened. Now that she finally had a chance, she could be said to have no scruples at all. She only wanted to take the other party's life. Only then could she truly vent her anger. When everyone saw Shangguan Yingying's ruthless and decisive manner, they could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. From what had happened before, they already knew that among Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, Shangguan Yingying's temper was the most explosive. At this moment, it was vividly displayed. Most importantly, they discovered that although Shangguan Yingying and Xiren did not have a heaven-defying existence like the blood force field, they also possessed the strength to fight above their level. They were clearly in a situation of 1 against 2, so logically speaking, they should have been at a disadvantage. However, the situation was the complete opposite. The two opponents had been chased all over the place, and it was difficult for them to hold on. They could not help but feel extremely surprised by such a battle record. Such strength was not something that could be easily obtained. Chapter 35-35. I'm afraid that Cheng Junha and the others are doomed this time. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three are clearly determined to take their lives. There's no room for refusal at all. That's normal. The training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples are very dangerous. It's a miracle that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were able to return safely. If it were you, I'm sure you wouldn't let them go so easily. I can see that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three are definitely not easy to bully. If they don't have enough strength, I think it's better for them to keep their grudges in their hearts. Otherwise, it's really not worth it to put their lives on the line. Cheng Junha has suffered a great loss this time. The surrounding cultivators sighed. Among them, there were many cultivators whose strength had decreased because of Bailey Hongzhuang's poison. Although Master Long had already given the order to let this matter pass, they were still somewhat dissatisfied. With their cultivation declining like this, it meant that they would have to waste a few more years before they could reach the same level. This might not seem like a big deal, but as disciples of the Penglai Palace, the possibility of becoming an inner palace disciple was greatly reduced. This was what everyone found most difficult to accept. It had to be said that during these days, there were many people who were scheming in their hearts. They were all thinking about how they could take revenge on Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. However, after seeing Cheng Juna's fate, they could not help but dismiss the idea in their minds. It was never too late for a gentleman to take revenge. It would be the stupidest thing to do if they lost their lives because of this. Thinking of this, everyone could not help but thank Cheng Junha and the others. If they had not taken the lead and taught them a lesson, they would have been unlucky as well. However, this time, Cheng Junha and the others were likely to be doomed. After Ren Ziheng and the others returned to the inner palace, they immediately handed in the mission and set off to look for their teachers. This matter is very special. We have to inform the teachers as soon as possible. If there are any changes in the training grounds later, everyone could be prepared in advance. A serious expression appeared on Ren Ziheng's face. He had stayed in the inner hall for quite some time, so he knew very well what kind of effect a change in this training ground would have on everyone. Just based on the situation in the past, they had already encountered a lot of obstacles during their training. There were dangers everywhere. This time, the situation was really too dangerous. If it weren't for the coincidence of everyone working together, they would have already become one of the skeletons. Therefore, now that such a huge change had occurred, they had to inform the cultivators in the inner hall of the news as soon as possible. Only then would everyone be able to take precautions. Hearing Ren Ziheng's words, Ren Zimei and the others nodded. That's right. This matter is too important. We have to let the teacher know first. Chu Jinfeng's expression was equally serious as he said in a deep voice. Previously, teacher said that no matter what happens in the training grounds, we must inform him immediately. Thinking of this, everyone couldn't help but quicken their pace. When Yi Hua saw that Ren Ziheng and the others had returned safely, he couldn't help but smile. You've returned safely. Chapter 35-36. Yi Hua nodded. You came looking for me as soon as you came back. Do you have something to report to me? Yi Hua knew his disciples very well. If nothing had happened, the first thing they would do after returning was to have a good rest instead of coming to him immediately. Ren Ziheng nodded. Instructor, we do have something to report to you. It's about what happened in the training ground. Looking at the serious look on Ren Ziheng's face, Yi Hua asked, what happened? In the next second, Ren Ziheng, Ren Zimei, and the others looked at each other and then told Yi Hua everything that happened in the training ground. Following Ren Ziheng's words, Yi Hua's calm and tranquil face was also filled with astonishment. You're saying that 4 pits and 4 liches appeared in the training ground at once? Yi Hua was in disbelief. This was something that had never happened in the training ground. That's right. This matter greatly exceeded our expectations. We almost couldn't make it back. Ren Ziheng replied with certainty. Instructor, this situation is really unusual. I'm afraid this is the first time something like this has happened. I just don't know if something similar will happen in the future. If the same thing happens again in the future, it'll be impossible for our disciples to guard against it. We need to increase the number of people in our group. Otherwise, we'll be wiped out if we run into them, Jing Tianlang said. A solemn expression appeared on Yi Hua's face. Are you sure that everything you said is the truth? Yes, we all saw this with our own eyes. There's absolutely nothing to hide. If you don't believe me, you can ask the other disciples. Looking at the serious look on Ren Ziheng's and the others' faces, Yi Hua nodded slightly. He had a certain understanding of his disciples. Ren Ziheng had always been a steady person. His words and actions were not exaggerated in the slightest, and he would not make up lies. Since he said so, then it must be true. It was just that the situation was too inconceivable and hard to believe. If I remember correctly, your mission during this time is to take care of the injured? Yi Hua asked slowly. Yes, Ren Ziheng replied. Yi Hua frowned. Since you're taking care of the wounded, then your team's combat power should be very weak. How did you survive with 4 holes? On this point, even Yi Hua could not understand. He was very clear about the strength of his disciples. Once 4 holes appeared, even they would not have any chance of surviving. Teacher, this matter is all thanks to a few disciples from the outer hall who accidentally entered the inner hall training grounds. Rinzime said with a smile. As soon as he said this, the surprise on Hua's face became even more intense. Oh, this matter is actually related to the Outer Palace disciples? That's right. These Outer Palace disciples should have just joined the Outer Palace. We've never seen them before. According to what you're saying, it was the performance of these Outer Palace disciples that allowed all of you to escape from danger. Chapter 35-37. The strength of the Inner Palace disciples had always been stronger than the Outer Palace disciples. This time, the situation was so dangerous. Logically speaking, the Outer Palace disciples should have died. However, not only did they not die, they even helped the Inner Palace disciples escape. It was really unbelievable. Looking at Hua's incredulous expression, Ren Ziheng and the others were not surprised. In fact, no matter who they told, they would find it hard to believe. If they had not experienced it personally, they would not have believed it either if it was someone else who told them. Instructor these 4 Outer Palace disciples are really strong. I think they will become the most outstanding disciples of the Inner Palace in the future. Ren Ziheng thought of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3, and his eyes were filled with admiration. Looking at Ren Ziheng's praise of the 4 Outer Palace disciples, Hua's eyes were also filled with interest. Since you all praise them so much, I believe that the strength of these 4 Outer Palace disciples is indeed very good. I wonder which 4 disciples they are. After you tell me their names, I will take a closer look. At this moment, Hua was already very interested in the Outer Palace disciples that everyone was talking about. If Penglai Palace had such good seedlings, he naturally could not miss them. He had to pay more attention to them. If he could promote them to the Inner Palace as soon as possible, that would be excellent. There Deep Beichun, Bailey Hongzhuang, Wen Ziren, and Shangwan Yingying, Ren Ziheng said slowly. As Ren Ziheng's voice fell, Hua's expression changed. His expression suddenly became interesting. Previously, he was still a little surprised. Since the 4 disciples were very strong, why would they accidentally enter the training ground of the Inner Palace disciples? After all, this usually happened when a cultivator was tricked. However, now that he knew who the 4 people were, he understood what was going on. If one were to ask who was the most unpopular cultivator in the Outer Palace, it would undoubtedly be Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. It was hard to understand if it happened to others, but it was normal for it to happen to Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. After all, the 4 of them had made several hundred enemies in the Outer Palace. The slightest bit of carelessness would cause them to fall into a trap. Similarly, if it was said that other Outer Palace disciples possessed such abilities, he would not believe it. However, if it was said that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 possessed such abilities, he had no choice but to believe it. It should be known that the commotion caused by Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 in the outer hall was unprecedented in the Penglai Palace. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have believed that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 could fight against hundreds of disciples. This battle record was too abnormal. So it's them. A smile appeared on Hua's lips. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 were really amazing. It had only been a short period of time, but it had actually brought him such a huge surprise. During this period of time, he had not seen Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. He thought that they had gone to the training ground of the Outer Palace disciples. He did not expect the 4 of them to go directly to the training ground of the Inner Palace disciples. Moreover, their battle record was so good. Looking at Hua's understanding look, Ren Ziheng and the others could not help but look at each other. They were surprised. Instructor, do you know them? Chapter 35-38. Listening to Hua's words, Ren Ziheng and the others couldn't help but look at each other. There was a trace of surprise in their eyes. They didn't know that the fame of Bailey Hongzhuang's group was so big that even their mentors had heard of them. Logically speaking, Outer Hall disciples were usually not valued by Inner Hall mentors, unless they were cultivators who had extremely outstanding performances and were not far from being promoted to Inner Hall disciples. However, according to their understanding, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had just joined Penglai Palace. How could they have gained the attention of Inner Hall mentors so quickly? This speed was a little too fast. It had never happened in the history of Penglai Palace. Mentor E, are they very famous in the Outer Hall? Why didn't I know? Chu Jinfeng frowned. He had always been well informed about the news in the Outer Hall. Logically speaking, he should have known about the appearance of such people. Izihua smiled faintly and said, "Since it's them, I have to inform Long Yanwei first." As Izihua's voice fell, everyone was slightly stunned. They could not help but think of a possibility. Mentor E, the cultivators who were rumored in the Outer Hall to have received a contract beast as a gift from Master Long. Could it be them? Ren Ziheng looked at Izihua. If he had not thought of this before, now that Izihua mentioned Long Yanwei, there was only one possibility left when these two things were connected. "It seems that you know them well," Izihua said with a smile. As soon as these words came out, everyone understood. Suddenly, their expressions became a little more interesting. Chu Jinfeng could not help but remember when he first met Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. He had asked them about these guys who had turned the Outer Hall upside down. He did not expect it to be Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. As soon as he remembered Bailey Hongzhuang's faint, awkward expression, he understood. It turns out that the famous cultivators in the Outer Hall are the four of them. We were too slow to realize it. Ren Zimei's face revealed a sigh, and there was a hint of annoyance. She should have thought of it back then, but she didn't expect her reaction to be so slow. Only now did she understand the crux of the matter. That's right. There are also four famous disciples in the Outer Palace. There are also four people. Plus, they are also very popular. Why didn't we think of that? Ren Ziheng couldn't help but pat his own head. He originally wanted to wait until he had reported this matter to the teacher before he went to see the few disciples from the Outer Palace. After all, to be able to obtain Lord Long's contracted beast as an Outer Palace disciple was not an easy task. Unexpectedly, he had already met Lord Long, haha. Izihua chuckled. You guys were able to get to know them so early and get along so well. This is also a kind of fate. Instructor, will they be joining the Inner Palace soon? Renzime could not help but ask. Just from Long Yanwei's different attitude towards Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, it was enough to prove that their starting point was completely different from the ordinary Outer Palace disciples. Becoming an Inner Palace disciple was already a sure thing, and the rest was only a matter of time. Chapter 35-39. Long Yanwei was originally resting in his house, but when Izihua suddenly sent someone to find him, he immediately went to Izihua's residence. As soon as he walked into the house, Long Yanwei saw Ren Ziheng and the others standing there, and a hint of surprise appeared on his handsome and calm face. His gaze then landed on Izihua and said, "Why are you in such a hurry to find me? Could it be that something has happened?" Izihua nodded. Something has indeed happened. I think you need to understand it. Noticing that Izihua's expression was extremely serious, and there was even a hint of seriousness, Long Yanwei's expression also changed a little, and he carefully listened to Izihua's description. You're saying that the situation in the training grounds has changed. For pits have appeared at once, and the frequency of the liches has greatly increased? Long Yanwei said in a deep voice. That's right. If such a situation really occurs, then when our disciples go to the training grounds in the future, the danger will greatly increase. It is absolutely not to be ignored. You're right. Long Yanwei's gaze sank, and his face was filled with thought. There will be some new changes in the training grounds every few years. Whether it's the skeletons or the liches, there will be some new changes. Compared to the last time, it has indeed been a long time, so it's not too strange for such a situation to occur. In my opinion, it's better for us to inform the Hall Master of this matter first. We still need to send someone to understand the specific situation in detail. The Hall Master has already returned. We should indeed report this news as soon as possible. Long Yanwei nodded, and then his gaze shifted to Ren Ziheng and the others. For pits appeared at once, and you little fellows were still able to return alive. Looks like your recent growth in strength is not bad, as expected of Yi Zihua's favorite disciple. Following Long Yanwei's words, Yi Zihua laughed softly, and then said, "Speaking of this matter, the reason why they were able to return safely has a lot to do with you." The moment these words were spoken, Long Yanwei could not help but be stunned. He frowned slightly and said, "What does this have to do with me? The reason they were able to return safely is all thanks to the 4 cultivators you recruited. Otherwise, they would have been completely wiped out this time." Yi Zihua looked at Long Yanwei in admiration. "This time, I really have to admire your foresight. You've really recruited 4 genius cultivators." If Long Yanwei didn't understand what Yi Zihua meant before, now that he heard him mention 4 cultivators, he immediately understood. He didn't recruit any cultivators recently, and the only ones he recruited were Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. "Are you saying that this matter has something to do with Bewitching and the others?" Long Yanwei couldn't help but ask. "That's right, it's them," Yi Zihua chuckled. "Their battle prowess is truly extraordinary. When they caused such a commotion in the outer hall, it was already shocking. I did not expect that with their strength, they would be able to achieve such a feat in the training grounds of the inner hall. This has truly exceeded my expectations." However, after hearing Yi Zihua's words, the confusion in Long Yanwei's heart grew even stronger. Chapter 3540. What do you think is the reason? Yi Zihua asked instead of answering the question. Long Yanwei pondered for a second after hearing Yi Zihua's words. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "Were they tricked?" Yi Zihua nodded. With their popularity in the outer palace, this situation isn't strange at all. Ren Ziheng and the others couldn't help but laugh when they heard this. Even though they hadn't seen it before, they felt that it was normal when they thought about the reputation of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 in the outer palace. By the way, instructor, according to our understanding this time, one of the liches seems to have evolved. The liches have evolved? Yi Zihua and Long Yanwei looked at Ren Ziheng together with surprise in their eyes. Ren Ziheng nodded, but his voice was filled with uncertainty. "We can't be completely sure about this matter, but the last lich is indeed different from the liches we've seen before. The person who understands this the most is Bailey Hongzhuang. She was also the one who proposed the lich's evolution." Why is Bailey Hongzhuang the one who understands it the most? Because in the process, Bailey Hongzhuang had been using her zither technique to deal with the lich's chanting. If it wasn't for her suppressing the lich's chanting, we wouldn't have been able to come back alive. Ren Ziheng had no intention of hiding anything. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were indeed their saviors this time, especially Bailey Hongzhuang's outstanding performance. This was something they couldn't hide at all. Yi Zihua and Long Yanwei's eyes lit up when they heard Ren Ziheng's words. They asked again, "You're saying that Bailey Hongzhuang has a way to suppress the lich's chanting?" "That's right. When we first discovered this, we were also very surprised. However, later on, the situation showed that Bailey Hongzhuang's zither technique can really suppress the lich's chanting. Moreover, it has a certain restraining effect on the skeleton army." As Ren Ziheng spoke, Ren Zimei and the others also expressed their opinions, proving that everything Ren Ziheng had said was true. Yi Zihua and Long Yanwei looked at each other. If all of this was true, then Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 had really brought them a huge surprise. One must know that the skeleton army and the lich had been around for a long time. Dealing with the skeleton army only required violent means. But to deal with the lich, no one could think of a good method. Under the protection of the skeleton army, everyone had to pay a huge price to deal with the liches, and they had no idea how to suppress the lich's chanting. Every time a lich appeared, it gave everyone a headache. Who would have thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would have a way to subdue a lich? It was a pleasant surprise. "We already know about this matter. You guys have worked hard this time. Go back and have a good rest. Leave the rest to me." Yizihua looked at Ren Ziheng and the others and said slowly. When they heard this, Ren Ziheng and the others understood that Yizihua and Long Yanwei were going to deal with this matter, and they immediately bowed and bid their farewells. Chapter 35:41. Long Yanwei smiled faintly. Originally, I was a little worried that the incident last time was too big and I didn't know how to report it to the Palace Master when he returns. Now that we have such a reward, I can report it to the Palace Master. Haha. Yizihua let out a hearty laugh. You're right. The commotion caused by these fellows last time was simply too big. It was indeed difficult to explain to the Palace Master. Now, we don't have to worry. With the results they have obtained this time, the previous troubles are nothing. Long Yanwei glanced at Yizihua and said, Now, let's find Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three so that we can understand the situation better. Yizihua nodded and immediately sent people to the outer hall to find Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. When Ren Ziheng and the others found out that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were the outer hall disciples that they had been very interested in, they sighed in their hearts. I really didn't expect them to be the outer hall disciples who have been in the limelight recently. We're really too late to realize it. Ren Zimei shook her head and sighed. No wonder their strength is so outstanding. When I heard that they had caused trouble in the outer hall, I didn't quite believe it. After all, their battle results were too frightening. But now I believe it. Just by looking at their battle strength against the skeleton army, nothing is impossible. Chu Jinfeng's face revealed a look of amazement. He had been half believing and half doubting before, thinking that the rumors were exaggerated. Now, he firmly believed it without a doubt. I understand why Bewitching was not the least bit nervous when facing Duan Huali. On the contrary, he dared to go tit for tat. With his strength in the inner hall, he will definitely be an influential figure in the future. Ren Ziheng slowly said, Isn't that great? Chu Jinfeng's eyes lit up. Duan Huali definitely doesn't know the true identity of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. If he knew, I'm sure he would be more restrained. Just as they were walking towards their residence, they saw Yizihua's men quickly walking towards their direction. Everyone couldn't help but be curious and asked what the other party was going to do. When they found out that the other party was going to look for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, their faces were filled with joy. Let's go take a look as well. They've been hiding our true identities. Now that we know, we can't pretend that we don't know. Chu Jinfeng's face flashed with interest. Although Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had never told them their true identities, he didn't think it was a big deal. In his heart, after the previous battle, they were already friends who went through life and death together. Moreover, they were not stupid people. They all understood why Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were hiding the truth from them. After all, they had obtained a contract beast as a gift from Lord Long. This matter was indeed too enviable. Just outside the outer hall, they had already caused such a huge commotion. If it were him, he wouldn't dare to reveal his true identity to the disciples of the inner hall. If he wasn't careful, it would attract even more trouble and could even lead to a fatal disaster. Hearing Chu Jinfeng's words, Ren Zimei and the others couldn't help but look at each other. They then nodded and smiled. Chapter 35:42. When Ren Ziheng and the others followed Yizihua's men to the outer hall to look for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, they did not see Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three at their residence. After asking around, they found out that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had not returned to their residence. Seeing this, Ren Ziheng and the others could not help but look at each other. They have obviously returned, but they have not returned to their residence. Could it be that as soon as they came back, they immediately went to find someone to settle the score? Ren Zimei could not help but ask. This is very likely. They were set up before and must have been holding it in. Now that they are back, it is normal for them to seek revenge. Chu Jinfeng nodded, and his eyes gradually brightened. Other than this possibility, he could not think of any other reason. Just thinking about Shangguan Yingying's violent temper, I think this is the only reason. A smile appeared in Run Ziheng's eyes. I'm afraid there will be a good show to watch. Seeing that Chu Jinfeng and Rinzime had the same idea as her, Rinzime also sighed. She did not expect Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three to be so efficient. They had just returned, and without resting, they had already gone to look for them. It seemed that Shangguan Yingying was not the only one in their team with a violent temper, but all of them were very impatient. Yizihua's men did not know what was going on at first, but now that he heard the conversation between Ren Ziheng and the others, he understood. You mean Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three went to seek revenge? If we guess correctly, that should be the case. Then do you know where they went to seek revenge? Yizihua's men were a little helpless. He did not know much about Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. The outer hall of Penglai Palace was not very big, but it was not small either. If he did not know anything, it would take some time to find them. Then we don't know. Ren Ziheng frowned. They only knew that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had been tricked by the cultivators from the outer palace. However, they did not know who exactly it was. They had asked about it before, but Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were very firm. They wanted to leave this matter to them, so they didn't ask too much. Moreover, now that they knew the true identities of Bailey Hongzhuang's group, they were clearly aware of how many enemies Bailey Hongzhuang's group had in the outer palace. As for which enemy they were looking for, it was not something that could be determined in a short period of time. That's going to be troublesome. Yizihua's subordinate had a worried look on his face. Yizihua had asked him to look for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three because he had something to ask of them. However, judging from the current situation, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to find them for a while. Seeing this, Run Ziheng couldn't help but say, "Why don't we split up and look for it? If I'm not mistaken, they should be in the residence of the outer palace disciples. They won't go anywhere else." Hearing this, the man's eyes lit up and he said, "Then I'll have to trouble you." "It's fine." Immediately after, Run Ziheng and the others split up and looked for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. They were very interested in Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's revenge. They wonder how far they would go. Chapter 35-43. At the same time, a burst of noise came from the front. Seeing this scene, Ren Ziheng and the others, who were about to split up to search, could not help but stop in their tracks. They looked at each other, and their expressions suddenly became interesting. No one spoke, but their eyes were focused on the same place. In the next second, everyone walked forward without hesitation. As everyone gradually approached, they found that most of the cultivators had gathered in front of them. The area was completely surrounded, and even they found it difficult to enter. Such a big commotion, could it be caused by Junior Brother D and the others? Rinzime asked in surprise. Chu Jinfeng chuckled. If I didn't know the true identity of Junior Brother D and the others, I definitely wouldn't have thought that such a big commotion would be caused by them. However, after knowing their true identity, I feel that there is no one else in such a situation other than them. As soon as these words came out, Ren Zime and the others looked at each other and felt that Chu Jinfeng's words were extremely reasonable. If this is really caused by them, then it's really beyond my expectations. Ren Ziheng sighed. Previously, he had always thought that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were very outstanding, but they had always been very low-key and humble. However, now it seemed that they were extraordinarily high-profile in the outer hall. The number of onlookers was really too many. Ren Ziheng and the others tried their best to squeeze in, but found that they could not even find a gap. However, even if they did not see what happened in front of them clearly, they could determine the main characters of the incident from the discussions of the surrounding cultivators. Li Shengkai and the others are definitely going to die now. I didn't expect them to court death by going against Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. It's expected that they would end up like this. From the beginning, I felt that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were not ordinary people. Fortunately, I didn't offend them before. According to my prediction, they will definitely be the 4 ruthless people of Penglai Palace in the future. You're right. In my opinion, if we can't build a good relationship with Bailey Hongzhuang and the others in the future, at least we can't offend them. Otherwise, we will really suffer the consequences. Rin Ziheng and the others also heard the conversations of the crowd clearly. They could not help but sigh in their hearts. These words were not said from the mouths of one or two cultivators, but many cultivators in the outer palace held such an attitude. This proved that although Bailey Hong Zhuang's group of 4 was not very popular in the outer palace, in everyone's hearts, they were already very powerful. They had only been in Penglai Palace for a short time, but they could make everyone be so sure of their strength. This was not something an ordinary cultivator could do. This alone had already laid the foundation for their future development. The sounds of fighting kept coming, and Rin Ziheng and the others also knew that Li Shangkai and his men were retreating step by step under the attacks of Bailey Hong Zhuang and the other 3. Even if they kept begging for mercy, it was to no avail. Chapter 3544. This is also a good thing. Otherwise, Duan Huali would think too highly of himself. Rin Zimei could not help but curl her lips at the mention of Duan Huali. She could not hide the disgust that was spreading from the bottom of her heart. I'm actually looking forward to Duan Huali finding out the truth later. Only then will there be a good show to watch. Chu Jinfeng smiled. Yizihua's subordinate took a look at the situation and could not help but frown. He did not expect such a scene after arriving. It was very difficult to squeeze in. Most importantly, based on his understanding, Bailey Hong Zhuang and the other 3 had caused a huge commotion in the outer hall. It had only calmed down recently. He did not expect it to start again. Thinking of this, the man could not help but look at Rin Ziheng and the others. He said, "The commotion now is really too big. I'll go back and report to Instructor E first." Hearing this, Rin Ziheng and the others nodded. If there was no instructor to oversee the situation, it would be impossible to evacuate everyone. Yizihua and Long Yanwei had been waiting in the room to see Bailey Hong Zhuang and the other 3. However, after waiting for a long time, they did not see anyone return. The 2 of them could not help but frown. Logically speaking, Bailey Hong Zhuang and the other 3 should have been found after such a long time. Why was there no movement at all? Just as the 2 of them were wondering if something had happened, a knock on the door rang out. The 2 of them could not help but sigh in relief. "Come in," Yizihua slowly said. In the next moment, Yizihua's subordinate walked in. After he walked in, Yizihua and Long Yanwei looked around. However, they did not see Bailey Hong Zhuang and the other 3 behind him. The 2 of them could not help but feel puzzled. "Why aren't they here?" Yizihua asked in surprise. "Instructor, they seem to have caused some trouble outside." Yizihua and Long Yanwei were stunned when they heard this. "What trouble?" "I went to the outer palace and found them fighting with other cultivators." The situation was very intense. Almost all the cultivators in the outer palace were attracted to them. Now that area is completely surrounded. Even if I wanted to squeeze in, there's no other way. The man helplessly reported the situation he saw in full detail. After understanding the situation, Yizihua and Long Yanwei couldn't help but look at each other, who knew that a helpless expression would appear on both of their faces. "Yanwei, I have to say that you have a good eye for people. However, the way these 4 little fellows stir up trouble is not ordinary. Now that they've just returned, they've already caused such a huge commotion. I'm afraid that in the future, there won't be a moment of peace in the outer palace." Chapter 3545. Forget it. Since we have nothing to do now, why don't we go outside and take a look? Long Yanwei pondered for a moment before speaking. Yizihua nodded. All right. When Yizihua and Long Yanwei arrived at the outer palace disciples' quarters, they noticed a sea of people. Almost all the outer palace disciples had gathered together. From their point of view, all they could see was a sea of heads. They could not see Bailey Hong Zhuang and the others at all. However, based on the fluctuation of yuan power, they could still determine that a battle was taking place at the center of the crowd. Lord Long and Instructor Yi are here. Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua's appearance had undoubtedly attracted the crowd's attention. Hence, cultivators immediately began to spread the news. Long Yanwei and Instructor Yi's appearance had clearly exceeded the crowd's expectations. In an instant, the crowd's expressions became very interesting. I never thought that Lord Long and the others would actually show up. Could it be that they had specially rushed over after hearing about Bailey Hongzhuang and the others? Now that Lord Long and the others have appeared, Li Shunkai and the others can be saved. Sigh. I never thought that Cheng Junhe and the others would be so lucky. They were already at death's door, and there was still a chance for them to turn things around. Cheng Junhe's face was extremely pale, and the wounds on his body were increasing. He was almost certain that he would not be able to live past today. However, just as he was about to lose all hope, he suddenly heard from the crowd that Lord Long and Instructor Yi had appeared. To him, these words were no different from the sounds of nature and had saved him from hell. A hint of color quickly returned to his originally pale face. His eyes were filled with joy as he looked at Bewitching. Lord Long and the others have arrived. I advise you to stop now. A hint of hesitation flashed across Bewitching's face when he found out that Long Yanwei and Instructor Yi had arrived. This had truly exceeded his expectations. However, regardless of whether Long Yanwei and Instructor Yi had arrived or not, he would definitely kill Cheng Junhe. At the same time, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others paused for a moment. They were almost done with their task, but they didn't expect Master Long and the others to come. Should they continue or stop? It was a question that they had to consider. After all, if they continued to attack, it would probably cause Long Yanwei to feel displeased. But if they stopped, then Cheng Junhe and the others would think of a way to escape and even find more opponents to deal with them. In this way, things would become much more troublesome. When Cheng Junhe saw Bewitching and the others hesitating, the smile on his face couldn't help but widen. He said, I advise you to stop now. Otherwise, when Lord Long blames you, you won't be able to bear the consequences. It's best that you don't mention the matter of us tricking you all to the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples. Even if you mention it, we will not admit to it. No one will believe you without any proof. A thick smile appeared on Cheng Junhe's face. It was as if he had found his backbone in an instant, and he became somewhat unrestrained. Bewitching frowned slightly when he saw Cheng Junhe's smug look. In the next moment, a dark light flashed in his bottomless black eyes. So what if other people don't believe you? A guy like you should just die and be reincarnated. Chapter 3546. Cheng Junhe did not expect that Bewitching would still dare to attack him after Master Long appeared. In his opinion, Bewitching should be very wary of Master Long. Now that Master Long appeared, Bewitching would stop immediately and even think about how to explain this matter to Master Long. However, he never expected that Bewitching would not play by the rules. Caught off guard, Bewitching's attack completely landed on Cheng Junhe's body. Bang! Cheng Junhe's figure flew out and felt a huge force hit his body. Intense pain came from his internal organs, and his whole body felt as if it was about to shatter. Everyone was dumbfounded after seeing Bewitching's actions. No one expected that Bewitching would dare to do such an outrageous thing under such circumstances. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two's reactions were completely different from the onlookers. After seeing Bewitching attack, they did not hesitate to speed up their movements. Since the enmity between the two sides had already been formed, the final outcome would inevitably be the fall of one side. Today, they had already come to this point, and there was no possibility of reconciliation between the two sides. Why waste time and give the other side more time to prepare? Wouldn't that be causing trouble for themselves? Therefore, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others only looked at each other, and in the next second, they directly took each other's lives. Li Shunkai originally thought that his savior had arrived, and he could not help but feel happy in his heart. His gaze towards Bailey Hongzhuang became a little more resentful. He begged for mercy in every possible way, but he only received cold words from the other party, who did not give him any chance at all. He also bore a grudge against Bailey Hongzhuang, and only hoped that after this matter was over, he could get back at her. However, After seeing the flash of killing intent in Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes, he could not help but feel a strong sense of fear in his heart. "Lord Long, save me!" Li Shengkai shouted. His sharp voice cut through the sky and resounded in the crowd. After Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua appeared, the surrounding cultivators all opened up a path for them to enter. Suddenly hearing Li Shengkai's call, Long Yanwei couldn't help but frown, and his footsteps quickened. As Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua walked into the crowd, they saw Bailey Hongzhuang's sharp blade fiercely stabbing into Li Shengkai's chest. There was no hesitation at all, only decisiveness and decisiveness. Li Shengkai's eyes widened as he stared blankly at Bailey Hongzhuang. His face was still filled with disbelief. He simply could not believe that Bailey Hongzhuang dared to take his life in front of Master Long. However, the intense pain in his body was real, and so was the blood flowing out his chest. He could only feel his life gradually slipping away. No matter how hard he tried to believe it, this ending could no longer be changed. While Bailey Hongzhuang was doing this, Deep Beichan, Wen Ziren, and Shangwan Yingying had also taken care of the other cultivators. Chapter 35:47. Since they had already done it, they might as well do it all at once. Ren Ziheng and the others followed behind Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua and arrived at the center of the crowd. However, they were dumbfounded when they saw what had happened. There were clearly many cultivators surrounding them, but at this moment, the surroundings were strangely quiet. Astonished gazes gathered on Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Their gazes were filled with shock and disbelief. However, the silence only lasted for a short while. When the crowd finally returned to their senses, discussions quickly surged like a tidal wave. Heavens, Deep Beichan and the others are too audacious. Lord Long is already here and they still dare to attack. Aren't they worried about Lord Long's punishment? From what I can see, they're worried that it would be troublesome to deal with Chang Junha and the others after Lord Long has stopped them. That's why they might as well use this opportunity to get rid of them all at once. That's true, but they're not giving Lord Long any face by doing this in front of him. The crowd sighed. For a moment, their gazes towards Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were filled with excitement. Ren Ziheng and the others clearly did not expect this to happen. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had still done this after Lord Long had appeared. It was no different from challenging Lord Long's dignity. What they've done seems to be a bit out of line. A worried look appeared on Ren Ziheng's face. If there were not so many cultivators around, or if Lord Long had not appeared, the situation would not have been so serious. After all, as long as they had gotten rid of Li Shengkai and the others before Lord Long appeared, even if Lord Long was angry, it would be after the fact. However, he believed that the punishment would not be too severe by then. However, with so many cultivators around, Lord Long was in a very awkward position in front of so many people. If he did not punish them severely, it would be difficult to convince the crowd. Ren Ziheng's face flickered with a thoughtful light. He then said in a deep voice, "Actually, their actions are not wrong. If we give them a chance to breathe, I'm afraid that they'll be in even more trouble in the future. Although we don't know what kind of role Li Shengkai and the others have in the Outer Palace, the fact that they were able to trick Bailey Hongzhuang and the others into going to the training grounds of the Inner Palace is enough to prove that their methods are not simple. But if that's the case, I'm afraid there will be some estrangement between Master Long and them." Chu Jinfeng said slowly. According to his understanding, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were recruited into the Penglai Palace by Master Long. They also received Master Long's favor and obtained 3 contract beasts. This was the first time in the history of the Penglai Palace. Logically speaking, they should have a very good relationship with Master Long, but now that this had happened, he couldn't tell how things would develop in the future. When Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua saw this scene, their expressions could not help but change. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 reacted very quickly. After putting away their weapons, they immediately bowed to Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua and said respectfully, "Greetings, Master Long, greetings, Instructor Yi." Long Yanwei and Zihua felt helpless when they saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's calm faces. Chapter 3548. Why are Master Long and Instructor Yi free to come to the outer hall today? Beichen's face was filled with a humble and polite smile, as if he wasn't the one who had taken their lives. That's right, we just came back from our training, and we're preparing to visit Master Long and Instructor Yi later. Xiren's face also quickly revealed a sunny smile. His entire person was as bright as the morning sun, as if he didn't know their current situation at all. It was as if killing Li Shengkai and the others was an extremely ordinary thing that had nothing to do with the environment in front of him. Bailey Hongzhuang and Shangguan Yingying also smiled as they looked at Long Yanwei and Xiren, revealing a bit of cleverness. That tranquil appearance had nothing to do with their previous ruthlessness. Seeing Beichin and the other three acting as if nothing had happened, Zihua glanced at Long Yanwei. These guys aren't ordinary troublemakers. It seems like you have a lot of mess to clean up behind them. Hearing Zihua's words, a trace of helplessness appeared on Long Yanwei's face. When these guys cheated him of the demon pet eggs, he already knew that these guys weren't easy to deal with. He had traveled extensively all these years, and there were very few people who could make him suffer. However, he had to admit that he had indeed fallen into the hands of these four little fellows. "What were you doing just now?" Long Yanwei slowly said. Hearing Long Yanwei's question, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three couldn't help but look at each other. They were very clear in their hearts that their reckless actions just now had undoubtedly touched Long Yanwei's prestige, especially in front of everyone. If they couldn't give an explanation, it would be tantamount to making Long Yanwei lose face. This wasn't a good thing. Firstly, Long Yanwei had always been very good to them, and they didn't want to make Long Yanwei lose face. Secondly, if Long Yanwei was dissatisfied with them because of this wasn't something they wanted to see. "Master Long, we were just dealing with some personal grudges." Beichen's expression was calm as he calmly narrated. In his opinion, this wasn't a big deal. In the outer hall, fights between cultivators had never stopped, and bloody incidents were common. This was something that everyone was used to. Right now, the most important thing was that after Master Long appeared, they still took the other party's life, which was somewhat disregarding Master Long's dignity. Therefore, as long as they could cover up this point, there wouldn't be any problems. Seeing Beichen's answer, Long Yanwei was somewhat speechless. His original intention of asking this question was, but Beichen's answer, which made him not knowing how to continue. When Rinziheng and the others saw that the situation seemed to be a little off, they couldn't help but stand up and say, "Master Long, these guys should be the ones who tricked them into coming to the inner hall to train. It's normal for such grievances to be resolved like this." "That's right. If it weren't for junior brother and junior sister's luck, they wouldn't have made it back alive," Rinzime said. "Every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. This is how it should be." Chu Jinfeng said. Chapter 3549. Seeing that Rinziheng and the others actually stood up for them at this time, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three also had a look of surprise in their eyes. Then it turned into gratitude. Under such circumstances, it was easy to offend Master Long if they were not careful. For any disciple of Penglai Palace, this was something that they did not want to see. Therefore, they could still take such a risk and stand up for them. Just this friendship was already very precious. When Long Yanwei and Zihua saw the actions of Rinziheng and the others, a trace of surprise quietly flashed in the depths of their eyes. Then it disappeared in the blink of an eye. It seemed that they still underestimated the friendship between Rinziheng and the others and Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Long Yanwei naturally knew that the previous actions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had indeed damaged his dignity. However, he himself did not take this kind of thing to heart. Moreover, as soon as he knew that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three went to the training ground of the Inner Palace disciples after being tricked, he had already expected that with the temper of these four guys, they would definitely find the other party to settle the score. However, He did not expect them to do it so ruthlessly and decisively. In fact, he knew very well in his heart that even if it were him, he would definitely not let go of such an opponent who wanted to take his life. Thinking of this, Long Yanwei did not feel any anger in his heart. Moreover, the results achieved by Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three in the training ground of the Inner Palace this time had already given him a lot of surprises. Geniuses always had a lot of privileges. This was the rule that everyone tacitly agreed upon. For a moment, the eyes of all the cultivators present were focused on Long Yanwei. They wanted to know what decision Long Yanwei would make. After all, the reason why Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were able to get the eggs was entirely because of Lord Long. Now that they had done such an outrageous thing, if Lord Long punished them, they were afraid that their future situation in the Penglai Palace would be much worse. Thinking of this possibility, everyone's hearts surged with strong expectations, especially some cultivators whose strength had decreased because of Bailey Hongzhuang's poison. They could not wait for them to disappear from Penglai Palace. However, Long Yanwei's next reaction was beyond everyone's expectations. "Are these guys the ones who lied to you?" Long Yanwei said slowly. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others could not help but look at each other. They did not know when Long Yanwei had found out that they had been deceived. However, after thinking about it, they nodded and admitted to it. "That's right, it's them." Long Yanwei glanced at the corpse on the ground and retracted his gaze. "It seems that the way I handled the matter last time is still somewhat unsatisfactory." As soon as these words were spoken, the expressions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others could not help but change. Could it be that Long Yanwei was really angry because of this? Compared to Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three who were worried and nervous, the cultivators who were watching the fight had a wide smile on their faces. As soon as Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three came to Penglai Palace, they enjoyed so many privileges. Everyone had long been envious, jealous, and hateful. Now that they saw that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three could finally be punished, everyone was extremely happy in their hearts. Since everyone is very dissatisfied with the way I handled it, then I won't say anything more. Long Yanwei sighed. Chapter 3550. In the future, you can deal with this personal grudge on your own. As Long Yanwei's voice fell, all the cultivators present could not help but be stunned. Then, they widened their eyes and looked at Long Yanwei in astonishment. Obviously, they found it hard to believe. Under such circumstances, he did not blame Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. On the contrary, he changed his previous decision. How could this not be surprising? I also know that some conflicts cannot be suppressed just because you want to. If everyone is not convinced, it is better to find a way to solve it on your own. Penglai Palace has never stopped fights between cultivators. However, before you act, everyone has to consider their own strength. Long Yanwei's expression was indifferent. His words were so calm that they did not contain any emotion. Usually, he put his mind on studying monstrous beasts. He did not care about the grudges between cultivators and the system of Penglai Palace. This time, if the matter had not become too big, he would not have intervened. He was also aware of the arrogance in the hearts of these cultivators. Even though this matter was caused by their greed, the punishment that Bailey Hongzhuang gave them was also something that they could not accept. Even though everyone had suppressed this resentment under his pressure, it was absolutely impossible for it to dissipate. This could be seen from how Cheng Juanhe and the others had secretly deceived Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Presumably, there were many cultivators in the outer palace who had the same idea. Since that was the case, it was better to let everyone settle their grudges on their own. He believed that after learning from Cheng Juanhe and the others' mistakes, everyone would think twice before making a move. Moreover, this was also a test for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. After Bailey Hongzhuang and the others heard this, they could not help but look at each other. The nervousness in their hearts dissipated a little. At least from Long Yanwei's attitude, they could tell that he was not angry. Ren Ziheng and the others were also surprised. They had always known that Master Long had an extremely good temper, but they did not expect that Master Long would tolerate Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three to such an extent. It could be seen that Master Long did not just admire Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. The other cultivators looked at each other for a moment. Such an outcome was really beyond their expectations. It seems that Master Long really thinks highly of Di Beichen and the other three. Under such circumstances, he is not angry at all. This is too unbelievable. Master Long's temper has always been very good, but this time's matter is indeed unexpected. I didn't expect that they would not be punished. It seems that it will be even more difficult to deal with them in Penglai Palace in the future. Master Long's attitude completely shows that he is on Bailey Hongzhuang's side, everyone's side. Although Long Yanwei's words were very neutral and did not show any support for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, he still did not punish Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three under such circumstances. From this point alone, one could see his true attitude. Favoritism. For a moment, this thought appeared in the minds of almost all the cultivators. Chapter 35:51. Cheng Juanhe was not a nobody in the outer palace. On the contrary, he was very famous and was a popular candidate to be promoted to the inner palace next time. Even though his strength had decreased due to the poison, everyone thought that he should not have been so easily dealt with by Di Beichen. However, the truth was right in front of everyone. Cheng Juanhe, who had been cultivating in the Penglai Palace for so long, was not as strong as a new disciple who had just joined the Penglai Palace. From this, it could be seen how outstanding the strength of Di Beichen and the other three were. Therefore, even though everyone was envious and dissatisfied, they could only choose to remain silent in the face of such strength. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three looked at Long Yanwei gratefully. Their previous actions had indeed put Long Yanwei in a very awkward situation. In their opinion, Long Yanwei would definitely be a little angry no matter what. However, they did not expect Long Yanwei to forgive them so easily. Speaking of which, Long Yanwei had been helping them ever since they joined the Penglai Palace. Now, he even ignored his own dignity and took care of them. How could it not be grateful? However, under the watchful eyes of everyone, they could not say anything. You have a good temper. Izihua sighed. He really admired Long Yanwei on this point. If it were anyone else, they would probably be angry no matter what, or even fly into a rage. However, Long Yanwei was able to act as if nothing had happened. This had something to do with Long Yanwei's originally calm temperament. However, the bigger reason was probably his admiration for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Hearing Izihua's words, Long Yanwei smiled faintly. Forget it. Do you and I care about these false reputations? I know that you have never cared about these false reputations. However, I'm afraid that everyone will be very dissatisfied if you are so biased towards them. Izihua said slowly. If they could also have such strength, I would also be biased towards them. Long Yanwei said with a smile. Seeing this, Izihua could not help but chuckle. Up to you. He also knew the reason why Long Yanwei did this. If Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had only displayed outstanding talents, he might not have gone to this extent. However, now that Bailey Hongzhuang had a way to subdue the Lich, the situation was completely different. The Liches had always been a huge problem for them. If there was a way to deal with them, it would be much more convenient for them to develop in the future. This point alone was enough to offset most of the mistakes made by Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. He believed that not only Long Yanwei, but even the Hall Master would make the same choice. After that, Long Yanwei's gaze descended onto Di Beichen's group of four, and he said, I just so happen to have some questions for all of you. Come with me. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three hurriedly cupped their hands and said, Yes. Long Yanwei and Izihua were the first to turn and leave. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three hurriedly followed behind them and left together. Ren Ziheng and the others looked at each other. In the end, they did not follow. However, when Bailey Hongzhuang and the others left, they gave them a look. After this matter was over, they would have a good gathering. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three followed Long Yanwei and Izihua all the way to Long Yanwei's residence. After entering the house, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three bowed. Chapter 35:52. Although Long Yanwei's attitude in the outer hall just now had already made everything clear, they already understood that Long Yanwei was tolerant of them. They would remember this kindness in their hearts. Hearing this, Long Yanwei waved his hand and said with a smile, "This is a personal grudge between you. I don't want to say anything more, but you guys really don't give me any face, as usual." Hearing the joking meaning in Long Yanwei's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's expressions were much more relaxed. "Master Long, we respect you very much in our hearts," Xiren hurriedly said with a serious expression on his face. "It's just that Li Shankai is not an easy guy to deal with. If we give up this opportunity, there will be more trouble in the future." They didn't deliberately want to affect Long Yanwei's dignity, but things happened so coincidentally that they had no other choice. This time, everyone knew that Cheng Junhe was scheming against them behind their backs. If they couldn't solve it, there would be more people coming to trouble them in the future. Killing the chicken to warn the monkey must achieve the best results in the first time. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to achieve such good results the next time. They had many enemies in the outer hall, and they didn't want to cause more trouble because of this hesitation. After all, their energy was focused on cultivation and improvement, and they didn't have more time to deal with these complicated conspiracies. "Master Long, this time we were indeed in the wrong first." Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen naturally understood that with Master Long's status in Penglai Palace, today's matter was indeed unbearable. It was precisely because of this that they were even more grateful for Master Long's tolerance. Looking at the grateful and apologetic faces of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, the smile on Long Yanwei's lips gradually widened. "I was just joking. You don't have to be so serious. If I really cared about these false reputations, I wouldn't have let you go just now." Izihua, who was originally quite critical of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's actions, after seeing their attitude of admitting their mistake at this moment, his face became a little better. In fact, he also admired Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three very much, but he was a little worried that they would be arrogant because of the favor. Fortunately, they still had their own sense of propriety. Now that he thought about it carefully, if he was in Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's perspective, he would probably do the same thing. After all, some things needed to be done at the right time. Hearing Long Yanwei's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. "Come, Long Yanwei." Long Yanwei's face was full of smiles. When face was full of admiration. Looking at Xiren's flattering appearance, Long Yanwei couldn't help but chuckle. "You don't have to flatter me. You've always been shrewd. If you flatter me, you'll probably take advantage of me again." "I'm speaking the truth from the bottom of my heart." When Xiren hurriedly patted his chest to express his sincerity. However, Long Yanwei obviously didn't buy Xiren's. A serious look quickly appeared on his face. "I called you here today because I have something to ask you." Chapter 35:53. I heard that all of you have mistakenly barged into the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples this time, and even achieved a good performance. Long Yanwei sized up Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. His dignified and handsome face was gentle, and he had a faint smile on his face. "Indeed, we have mistakenly barged into the training grounds. This is all thanks to Cheng Junhe," Di Beichen slowly said. "However, we are only trying our best to save our own lives." Hearing that, Long Yanwei waved his hand. "You don't have to be so humble. I already have some understanding of your strength from the previous incident." Izihua on the side also nodded. The last time Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three made such a big move, it was the first time in Penglai Palace. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, even he would have found it hard to believe. The destructive power that the four cultivators could cause was far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. What I am more interested in is that I heard that you have a way to deal with the lich's chanting. Long Yanwei's gaze fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. This was what they were most concerned about. As Long Yanwei's voice fell, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three understood that Long Yanwei had purposely gone to the outer palace to look for them. What he was talking about was Bailey Hongzhuang's Guqin technique. Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. She also understood why Ren Zixing and the others would appear among the crowd at that time. They must have reported this matter to Long Yanwei, and Long Yanwei went to the outer palace to look for them. That's right. I also accidentally discovered that the Guqin technique has such an effect. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was calm. She did not have any intention of hiding anything from Long Yanwei. I see. Long Yanwei smiled faintly. Can you tell me how you felt when you used the Guqin technique to deal with the lich? I found that when I used the Guqin technique to deal with the lich, I found that different Guqin sounds would have different effects. The lich's chanting also seems to have some changes. However, I have not been in contact with the lich for a long time, so my understanding is not comprehensive. Thinking back, in the process of dealing with the lich, Bailey Hongzhuang had only tried some of the methods he had mastered. Different Guqin sounds did indeed have different effects, but she had only fought with the lich for a short time. If she wanted to get a more specific answer, she was afraid that she could not give a more specific answer. Long Yanwei nodded his head. You are able to subdue the lich's method. This is already a huge gain for us. Yizihua was also very interested in Bailey Hongzhuang. According to your judgment, do you think that only your zither technique has such an effect, or any zither technique can achieve a certain effect? Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang pondered for a moment and said, according to my judgment, the lich's chanting is the power of sound, and the Guqin technique is also the power of sound. If my judgment is not wrong, any Guqin technique should have a certain effect. However, the specific effect can only be discovered after a specific person performs it. Are you sure? Yizihua's eyes lit up and his voice became louder. Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but look at Yizihua. After pondering for a moment, she nodded her head. I'm sure. Chapter 35-54. After receiving Bailey Hongzhuang's confirmation, Yizihua and Long Yanwei's face simultaneously revealed a touch of joy. This was undoubtedly excellent news for them. If only Bailey Hongzhuang's zither technique could achieve such an effect, then things would be more complicated and it would be very difficult to suppress the lich. After all, this method was in the hands of Bailey Hongzhuang alone. If they wanted Bailey Hongzhuang to hand over this method, it would be very difficult. But if others could also do this, then it would be different. At least, this proved that they had a method to deal with the lich. This would be of great help to their disciples when they went to the training grounds. At the same time, it could also reduce the casualties of their disciples. If that's the case, then it's really great. A smile appeared on Yizihua's face. Bailey Hongzhuang, if we can prove that this is true, then you will have made a great contribution. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. She didn't feel much joy because of Yizihua's words of making a great contribution. She just happened to master the zither technique and discovered this after facing the lich. If other cultivators who mastered the zither technique were present, she believed that they would also discover this. We will send people to verify the effect of the zither technique. If it can really subdue the lich, then we will report this news to the palace master. Long Yanwei's admiring gaze fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. He had always admired Bailey Hongzhuang. In fact, the reason why he decided to recruit Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three was not only because of their tyrannical fighting talent, but also because Bailey Hongzhuang's contract beast made him very interested. Now, after seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's various performances in Penglai Palace, he increasingly felt that this woman was able to obtain such a level of contract beast because of herself. At the very least, ordinary cultivators would be very happy after hearing Yizihua's words. However, Bailey Hongzhuang was neither sad nor happy. She was unexpectedly mature. I hope my judgment is not wrong. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a smile, her voice gentle and natural. Although the matter had not been confirmed, both Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua had a certain amount of confidence in Bailey Hongzhuang's judgment. Later, I'll send someone to find a cultivator who has mastered the music technique. However, there aren't many cultivators who have mastered this skill, Yi Zihua sighed. The main reason why no one had discovered that music could be used against the liches was because there were very few cultivators who had mastered music. The zither music technique itself was a very powerful martial skill, but this skill was a little special. If one didn't master it well, then ordinary zither music technique would be in a weak position when facing other cultivators. It could be said that it was very difficult to achieve certain results, unless one could cultivate the zither music technique to a very outstanding level. Such cultivators would often be able to achieve great results. However, it was not an easy thing to cultivate it to an outstanding level. Chapter 3555. Although you've mistakenly entered the training grounds this time, the results you've achieved have really impressed me. Long Yanwei's gaze once again fell on Deep Beichun and the others. Previously, Ren Ziheng and the others had praised them exceedingly. They had almost given all the credit to the four of them. Hearing Long Yanwei's praise, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others smiled at the same time. They knew that this was definitely the result of Ren Ziheng and the others' report. This had completely exceeded their expectations. Before this, none of them had thought that Ren Ziheng and the others would report this matter to Yi Zihua and give all the credit to them. However, now that they knew all of this, they understood the sincerity of Ren Ziheng and the others. If they were selfish, they could take all the credit for themselves. After all, if the other party was not Yi Zihua, most people would not believe them, even if they said that the credit was given to Deep Beichun and the others. As a result, they were even more certain that Ren Ziheng and the others were friends worth making. Although they had been deceived into entering the training grounds of the Inner Hall disciples and had almost lost their lives, they were fortunate to have made a group of good friends. In comparison, this harvest was already considered to be extremely good. Lord Long, I have a question to ask. Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly spoke. Long Yanwei also glanced at Bailey Hongzhuang. His eyes flickered with a wise light. You want to ask about the training grounds of the Inner Hall disciples? Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. That's right. I never knew that such a place existed in the Shangxian continent. This has really exceeded my expectations. May I know where this place came from? Bailey Hongzhuang had been curious about this for a long time. However, Ren Ziheng and the others had not given her a reasonable explanation. 1,000 years ago, she was still very familiar with the Shangxian continent. At that time, there was no such thing as a skeleton army. Moreover, the current Shangxian continent was completely different from before. She wanted to know more about it. Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua glanced at each other. After pondering for a moment, they said, "This question is not something that an outer palace disciple should know. However, since the both of you have come into contact with the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples in advance, I believe that the both of you will become a member of the Inner Palace disciples sooner or later. So, it doesn't matter if you know about it earlier." As soon as he said that, the eyes of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three lit up. They were very curious about this matter. This matter can be said to be extremely complicated. Long Yanwei slowly spoke out. A few hundred years ago, a shocking war occurred in the Shangxian continent, and the number of genius cultivators that fell was countless. At that time, a mysterious force had appeared in the Shangxian continent. They had mastered the power of darkness and could turn fallen cultivators into skeletons, allowing them to regain their fighting strength. This force was extremely terrifying. They wanted to use this method to increase their influence. In the end, the various major forces in the Shangxian continent decided to encircle and annihilate them. The result was naturally a victory. However, the price they paid was also very high. This was because the destructive power of darkness was extremely tyrannical. coupled with its mysteriousness, it resulted in this. Chapter 3556. Listening to Long Yanwei's narration, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's faces were filled with deep shock. They had never heard of such news before. Even in the history books of the Shangxian continent, there were no records of this. Previously, in order to understand what had happened in the past 1,000 years, Bailey Hongzhuang had specially flipped through the relevant history books of the Shangxian continent. However, she did not obtain any useful information. Now that she had heard everything from Long Yanwei, she finally understood a little. This dark force is extremely powerful. Back then, those cultivators who died seemed to have been cursed. Their corpses eventually turned into a skeleton army. Even now, the cultivators who died would also become a member of the skeleton army. The skeleton army's destructive power and influence are extremely powerful. Furthermore, under their assimilation, this force will become more and more powerful. If it is not controlled, the consequences will be unimaginable. Because of this, our various major forces have always been working hard to control the influence of the skeleton army. This is so that it will not affect the lives of normal cultivators. The fundamental reason why the Penglai Island maintains a certain distance from the outside world is also because of this. Once the skeleton army comes into contact with ordinary people in the outside world, its destructive power will increase by several folds. Therefore, only cultivators who have reached the 5th level of the Purple Realm can come here. As Long Yanwei's voice fell, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were in a state of deep shock. They had always thought that the Penglai Island was a place where outstanding cultivators gathered. However, they did not expect that the fundamental reason for this was that the Penglai Island was established to protect the outside world. When they found out about this, their hearts could be said to be extremely shocked. Everything had a reason. Perhaps this was because the stronger one was, the greater the responsibility. Looking at the shocked expressions on Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's faces, Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua were very calm. In fact, every cultivator who came to the Penglai Island and found out about the truth had the same reaction. I didn't expect there to be such a reason. It's really an eye-opener. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but sigh. Although she didn't know what kind of war had taken place hundreds of years ago, nor did she know how terrifying the dark forces were, she could feel that the war back then was absolutely earth-shattering from the skeleton army she had seen. This dark force was too terrifying. Controlling the skeletons was tantamount to having countless helpers. After all, there were many corpses in this world. Not only that, but because of that great battle back then, the situation of the entire Shangxian continent has also undergone a great change, Long Yanwei said indifferently. As soon as he said this, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes couldn't help but light up. I wonder how the situation in the Shangxian continent has changed. The Shangxian continent in the past was completely different from how it was now. She had always wanted to know what kind of changes had taken place, but no one she had come into contact with could give her a definite answer. Chapter 3557. Bailey Hongzhuang had always felt that this was a little strange. This was because she was very clear about the foundation and influence of those old forces. Logically speaking, even after so many years with the strength that they had accumulated, it was not impossible for them to maintain it. At the very least, among so many forces, there must be some that could be preserved. However, she seemed to have touched the peak of the Shangxian continent, but she had never come into contact with those forces. This was really too strange. What she could not understand the most was that the strength of the Shangxian continent 1,000 years ago was much stronger than what she had come into contact with now. Could it be that after the Great War many years ago, the strength of the entire Shangxian continent had declined? Long Yanwei was silent for a moment, then said, "You will slowly come to know this when you become an inner palace disciple and your strength has increased. With your current situation, you will not be able to come into contact with it for the time being. We will not tell you for the time being. In fact, this world is much more complicated than you think. Izihua also nodded. When it's time to know, you will know sooner or later. Seeing Long Yanwei and Izihua's attitude, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three could not help but look at each other. They were even more puzzled in their hearts. Long Yanwei had already told them about the skeleton army. They did not expect that he would keep the situation of the Shangxian continent a secret. This was really puzzling. However, they did not ask in the end because they believed that since Long Yanwei and Izihua had such an attitude, they must have their reasons. Since they were still unable to come into contact with that level with their current strength, it was better not to be anxious. When it was time to know, they would know sooner or later. Thank you for your guidance, Lord Long. I have understood a lot. Bailey Hongzhuang cupped her hands. If Long Yanwei had not told them about this situation, they would have even more doubts in their hearts. Hearing this, Long Yanwei smiled faintly. There's a reason why I have such high hopes for you. I believe that you have enough confidence to be promoted to Inner Palace Disciple, right? Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three also smiled. Lord Long, please rest assured. We will definitely become Inner Palace Disciples. We will definitely not embarrass you. Then I'm relieved. Long Yanwei nodded his head. The smile on his face widened a little. However, an ordinary cultivator is unable to come into contact with this internal information. Only the members of the inner hall of the various large factions are able to understand everything. I have decided to tell all of you, since all of you have coincidentally come to know a little about it. All of you cannot spread this information out now. Do you understand? We understand. We won't leak a single word about this. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had serious expressions on their faces. This was something that Ren Ziheng and the others had told them before. This was because if this news was leaked out prematurely and ordinary cultivators knew about it, it would definitely cause a certain amount of panic, which was not beneficial at all. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three understood this point, Long Yanwei also relaxed a little. Since that's the case, then there's nothing else. I'm afraid that the training ground this time is also very tiring. Go back and have good rest first. Chapter 3558. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were about to leave, there was a sudden knock on the door. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three immediately quickened their steps, no longer bothering Long Yuanwiwi. I never thought that something like this had happened in the Shangxian continent before. Then, the reason why the skeletons we saw became like this was entirely because of the power of darkness? Shangguan Yingying's face flashed with amazement. Previously, when Ren Ziheng and the others told him about it, it was not so specific. Now that she knew the reason for all this, she only felt that it was too inconceivable. Before witnessing it with her own eyes, she simply could not believe that there was a power that could restore a corpse's fighting strength. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. That should be the case. I've never seen the power of darkness before, but it must be a very terrifying power. The dark aura that we felt in the training grounds of the Inner Hall disciples, as well as the black chi that could not be removed from our bodies after we were injured, should all belong to the power of darkness. Just from this point alone, we can see how terrifying it is. Thinking about it, the battle back then must have been very tragic. There are not many people who have mastered this power, but its destructive power must be extremely powerful. Di Beichan spoke slowly in a deep voice. His eyes were as deep as the sea, filled with the light of wisdom. Xiren sighed. In this world, there are only things that can't be imagined, but nothing can't happen. If I can master this power of darkness, it will be very terrifying. Speaking of this, Xiren's eyes could not help but light up as an idea flashed through his mind. Do you think there are still cultivators who have mastered the power of darkness? Bailey Hongzhuang frowned slightly and shook her head. I don't know. Even if there are, I'm afraid that they wouldn't dare to show their talents. I think it's very likely that such a cultivator still exists. After all, even if the cultivators who grasped the power of darkness back then were wiped out by other forces, since this power existed, it definitely wouldn't disappear completely. Someone will continue to pass it on. Just like the inheritances we've seen before, all powers will exist in a secret way, Bewitching said. Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at Bewitching and agreed with what the latter said. You're right, it's very likely. If a cultivator who has mastered the power of darkness really exists, then his strength must be very terrifying. Even if he's tyrannical, it's useless. He doesn't even dare to use it openly. Xiren shrugged. It must be a very frustrating feeling. Forget it, there's no need to think so much, Shangguan Ying curled her lips. It's, in the future, we Hongzhuang to the Hongzhuang to Tesses. Once she became an Inner Palace disciple, she would definitely have to go to the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples. Just thinking about how she would have to face these skeletons in the future gave her a very bad feeling. The gloomy aura really made her feel unhappy from the bottom of her heart. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were talking and walking further away, a series of footsteps suddenly came from behind. Bewitching. Hearing this call, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three could not help but stop and turn around to look behind. Chapter 35:59. Seeing the person who came, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's faces showed a trace of surprise. Without waiting for them to ask, the cultivator spoke first. Lord Long has sent me to inform you that the palace master wishes to see you. As the man's voice fell, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others couldn't help but look at each other. Their expressions were a bit complicated. They may have heard of the palace master of Penglai Palace, but they do not have any understanding of his temperament. The last time they had caused such a huge commotion in the outer palace of Penglai Palace, Lord Long had been worried about how he would explain it to the palace master. However, the palace master had not been in Penglai Palace at the time, so they have never been punished. Now that the palace master has returned and wants to see them, things have become a little more complicated. Seeing the change in the expressions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, the cultivator spoke up. Lord Long and teacher, ye have said that they will accompany you. I believe that with them around, there shouldn't be any major problems. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three nodded. They then followed the man and returned to Lord Long's residence. At this point, it was useless for them to have any suspicions in their hearts. They would only be able to find out the palace master's true intentions after meeting him. Counter soldiers with arms and water with an earth weir. This had always been their attitude when faced with difficulties. They believed that the heavens would never bar one's way, and that there would always be a way. When Long Yanwei saw that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had returned, he said, "The palace master has only just returned today, and he has already sent someone to see you. He must have heard about what had happened." As soon as these words were spoken, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's hearts sank. It seems that their judgment was not wrong. The palace master had indeed come to see them because of what they had done. You don't have to worry too much. Although you had caused a huge commotion, overall, this matter was not your fault. Long Yanwei comforted Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Later on, if the palace master asks you anything, just answer him truthfully. The palace master is not someone who cannot distinguish right from wrong. We understand. A complicated light flashed through Bewitching's bottomless black eyes, but his face was very calm, revealing a bit of calmness and composure. For Penglai Palace to have such a status on Penglai Island, its palace master naturally could not be someone who could not distinguish right from wrong. On the contrary, he should be very wise. In the face of such an expert, he was not too worried. Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua nodded inwardly when they saw the stable emotions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Then, they led Bailey Hongzhuang and the others towards the palace master's sleeping quarters. The palace of the palace lord was located at the back of the Penglai Palace. It was very wide and hidden. The closer they got to the palace master's chambers, the quieter Bailey Hongzhuang and the others found that there were fewer and fewer people around. However, they could still feel that there were some gazes on them. Come to think of it, these should be the guards here. Although there seemed to be no one here, if someone dared to force their way in, they would probably be attacked immediately. After standing in front of the sleeping quarters and announcing their arrival, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three followed Long Yanwei and Yi Hua into the sleeping quarters. As soon as they entered the sleeping quarters, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three saw a white figure. Chapter 3560. Bai Songming had a handsome face and an extraordinary temperament. His black eyes were unfathomable as he sized up Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four. It was as if he could see through their hearts, leaving them with nowhere to hide. "Greetings, Hall Master." Everyone bowed. Bai Songming nodded and indicated that there was no need for formalities. His gaze then landed on Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four. As Bai Songming's gaze swept over them, Bailey Hongzhuang's group felt as if they had been completely seen through. They lowered their heads and sighed inwardly. The Penglai Palace's Hall Master was indeed extraordinary. With their current strength, it was impossible for an ordinary person to give them the feeling of being seen through, unless it was a cultivator who was much stronger than them. So far, Bai Songming could be said to be the first person they had encountered. Bai Songming briefly sized them up before withdrawing his gaze. He then looked at Long Yanwei and said unhurriedly, "These four are the little fellows that you made an exception for." Long Yanwei nodded. "That's right, it's them." Although he had never seen the Hall Master before, he knew very well that the Hall Master was well informed. He believed that the Hall Master had already found out everything that had happened in this short period of time. "Their appearances are very outstanding, but I don't know if they're worth making an exception for." Bai Songming spoke indifferently. No emotion could be heard from his indifferent voice. In the next second, Bai Songming's gaze once again turned to Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four. "The commotion you caused a few days ago wasn't small. It was just a simple sentence, but gave Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four a heavy pressure." His penetrating gaze shot straight at them, as if he wanted to see through all their thoughts. Long Yanwei was about to defend Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four when he was stopped by Bai Songming. "You don't have to be in a hurry to speak. I'm asking about them." Long Yanwei could only shut his mouth when he saw this. He could not help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four. It seemed that the Hall Master intended to personally test them. Standing to one side, Yi Hua was also silent. The Palace Master always had his own thoughts. At such a time, even if they wanted to explain, it would be useless. Everything would depend on the performance of the four of them. "Answer it yourselves. Since the Hall Master has summoned us here, he must have already understood what happened and made some considerations. No matter what we say now, it will not change the Hall Master's mind. Moreover, I believe that with the Hall Master's wisdom, he will definitely be able to view this matter accurately." Bewitching raised his head slowly and looked straight at Bai Songming. His handsome and calm face didn't reveal the slightest trace of fear, and it revealed a calm expression instead. Bai Songming and Bewitching's gazes met, and Bai Songming noticed that Bewitching didn't shrink back in the slightest, nor did Bewitching reveal the slightest fear, and a wisp of a glow of interest couldn't help but flash within Bai Songming's eyes. This kind of attitude that was neither servile nor overbearing made him admire it very much. In this Penglai Palace, there were not many cultivators who could be so calm when they saw him. He somewhat understood why Long Yanwei would treat them differently. "You're quite bold to speak to me like this." Bai Songming spoke in a deep voice. At this moment, there wasn't the slightest trace of light in his pitch-black and deep eyes, and the atmosphere in the entire sleeping quarters seemed to have stopped in an instant. Chapter 3561. The entire hall suddenly fell silent, and the atmosphere became extremely tense. Long Yanwei and Yi Hua looked worriedly at Bewitching. He had to answer properly at a time like this. If he angered the Palace Master, it would not be easy to deal with the consequences. Compared to the worries of Long Yanwei and the rest, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two trusted Bewitching very much. No matter how Bewitching answered, they would support him wholeheartedly. I believe that the palace master has already understood this from what we have done previously. Bewitching spoke slowly as a faint smile appeared on his handsome face. I believe that any cultivator with achievements would not be timid. What does the palace master think about this? Bewitching's expression was calm. He knew very well that no matter what explanation they gave, it would be of no use to the palace master. This was because the palace master already had his own judgment in his heart. Instead of giving an explanation at a time like this, it would be better to just admit it frankly. This would make the palace master admire them even more. At the very least, daring to own up to one's actions had always been a characteristic of powerhouses. If they were timid and afraid of trouble, the palace master would probably look down on them the most. Bewitching sized up Bewitching. When he first saw Bewitching's outstanding appearance, he did not think much of it. However, after hearing Bewitching's answer, he admired him even more. Do you all have the same thoughts as him? Bewitching looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two who had remained silent and asked slowly. That's right. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. We were indeed responsible for the previous incident, and we do not wish to shirk our responsibilities. Xiren and Shangguan Yingying also maintained the same attitude. The four of them were originally one, so their thoughts and attitudes were naturally the same. Of course, they would not be disloyal. Do you know how much of an impact the commotion you caused previously had on the entire outer hall? Do you know how much damage it caused? Bewitching's voice deepened as an enormous pressure pressed down on Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Under this pressure, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others felt as if a huge mountain was pressing down on them, making it hard for them to breathe. Their foreheads instantly broke out in cold sweat, and even their upright bodies were slightly hunched over. Seeing this scene, Long Yanwei involuntarily cried out, "Home Master." Bewitching raised his right hand slightly and directly stopped Long Yanwei from speaking, and he indicated for Long Yanwei to keep quiet. Seeing this, Long Yanwei frowned and shut his mouth in the end. You guys are so daring. Could it be that you're relying on Long Yanwei's admiration for you? Bewitching raised his eyebrows. The Penglai Palace is not a place where you can act as you please. Aren't you afraid that I will punish you? Temple Master, we didn't act recklessly just because Lord Long admires us. Bewitching furrowed his beautiful brows. Under this enormous pressure, it became difficult for him to speak. We were indeed in the wrong for causing such a huge impact previously. However, this matter has nothing to do with Lord Long. We have let Lord Long down. If Temple Master really wants to punish us, we accept it. However, I hope that Temple Master will not implicate Lord Long in this matter. All of these mistakes were caused by the four of us, and it has nothing to do with Lord Long at this moment. Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but speak out. Chapter 3562. Any person in a high position would be able to control their emotions very well. Apart from the person himself, it was very difficult for others to see through his emotions. However, regardless of whether Bewitching really wanted to punish them, at the very least, they could not implicate Long Yanwei. Long Yanwei had been helping them since they entered the Penglai Palace. If Long Yanwei was implicated because of this, they would truly feel apologetic. After Long Yanwei heard what Bailey Hongzhuang and the others said, his gaze became gentler. At least at a time like this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were still thinking of not implicating him. If it were some selfish cultivator, they would have used him as a shield at this moment. Izihua exchanged glances with Long Yanwei, and a faint smile surfaced in his eyes. Clearly, he had the same thoughts as Long Yanwei. Although Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had rejected Long Yanwei's request, they could still see the sincerity of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Being able to express such an attitude at a time like this at least proved that they were grateful to Long Yanwei from the bottom of their hearts. Bewitching's gaze remained on Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, and his calm face became even more unfathomable. At this moment, Bewitching suddenly spoke up. I believe that the palace master will not punish us. Bewitching raised his brows when he heard that. What do you mean? If the palace master really wanted to punish us, he would have done so long ago. He would not have spent so much time talking to us. Bai Tsangming suddenly chuckled. You're quite smart. Everyone present could not help but heave a sigh of relief when they heard Bai Tsangming's words. It seemed like Bai Tsangming's attitude of wanting to punish them was just an act. In reality, he did not intend to punish Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. How are you so sure that I won't punish you? Bai Tsangming looked at Di Beichen with great interest and asked, as the palace master of the Penglai Palace, you must be a person who rewards and punishes clearly. Di Beichen slowly said, since that is the case, you are very clear about what happened before. Presumably, you also know that we were forced to do such a thing in a helpless situation. Therefore, I believe that you will not punish us. Otherwise, it will damage your reputation. According to what you've said, I really have no reason to punish all of you. Bai Tsangming raised his brows. Otherwise, wouldn't everyone say that I'm unfair? I didn't say that. Looking at Di Beichen's calm appearance, the smile on Bai Tsangxing's lips widened a little. I now understand why Long Yanwei sees you in a different light. I hope you won't disappoint him. After all, the treatment he gave you is unprecedented in the Penglai Palace. If you can't get a good result, the one who will lose face is him. Long Yanwei revealed a smile when he saw Bai Tsangming's attitude, and then he reminded Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Why aren't all of you thanking the palace master? You caused such a huge commotion earlier and caused quite a bit of trouble for the Penglai Palace. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others hurriedly bowed when they heard that. Thank you, palace master. Bai Tsangming waved his hand. If you want to thank someone, then thank Long Yanwei. I didn't do anything. He had already dealt with this matter completely before I returned. Chapter 3563. The atmosphere in the hall eased up and was no longer as heavy as before. Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest were no longer as anxious as before, and the conversation became much more relaxed. I heard that you guys caused quite a commotion in the outer hall today. Bai Tsangming looked thoughtfully at Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Looks like with you guys here, the outer hall will be lively for a while. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were stunned when they heard that, and their expressions were a little awkward. If they knew that the palace master would be back today, they would definitely not have chosen to find trouble with Chang Junhe and the rest today. At the very least, they would have behaved themselves for a while. However, they did not expect that things would be so coincidental. They had just managed to cover up the previous incident with great difficulty, and today, they caused another commotion in the outer hall. Bai Tsangming did not seem to notice the awkward expressions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three as he continued. Long Yanwei has been in the Penglai Palace for so long, but this is the first time that someone has humiliated him like this. It's a pity that I didn't get to see it with my own eyes today. As he spoke, Bai Tsangming's gaze fell on Long Yanwei with a hint of mockery. Palace Master. Long Yanwei's face revealed a trace of helplessness. He knew that Bai Tsangming was laughing at him for reaping what he sowed. If he had not recruited Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, he would not have been humiliated like this today. Ha! Bai Tsangming's smile widened. This is the first time that I've seen such a helpless look on your face. Who asked me to recruit these little fellows? I have to take responsibility. Long Yanwei sighed. Previously, he did not expect these little fellows to be so good at stirring up trouble. Moreover, they were not the type to endure silently. When they did something, it was natural for them to cause such a huge commotion. It's rare to see you being humiliated like this. It's very interesting. Bai Tsangming smiled faintly and did not continue to mock Long Yanwei. Today's incident was indeed because we did not take Lord Long's feelings into consideration. We are truly ashamed. A hint of guilt appeared on Di Beichen's handsome face. We will definitely not do such a thing again in the future. Bai Tsangming nodded and said, all of you have to be more careful in the future. All of you can be considered to be lucky to have been tricked into entering the training grounds of the inner hall this time. If you were slightly careless and lost your lives there, then your losses would be great. Upon hearing Bai Tsangming's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three cupped their hands together. Thank you for your reminder, Home Master. We'll be extra careful in the future. This matter was a loss of face for them. They had actually been tricked into going to the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples. Speaking of which, they were quite gullible. Palace Master, although they accidentally stumbled upon the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples this time, they still managed to gain some benefits. It's not bad at all. At this moment, Yi Zihua, who had been silent all this while, finally spoke. Oh, Bai Zongming raised his eyebrows and looked straight at Yi Zihua. Clearly, he was waiting for the latter to explain further. Even though the four of them are only disciples that have just entered the outer palace, the fact that Long Yanwei thinks so highly of them proves that their abilities are not simple. This time, they didn't rely on luck to come out safely from the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples. On the contrary, they relied completely on their strength. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.